What if your cable tower was more than just a cable tower? What if you could make it into a rack or mount it to your wall? Enter the RXd RX3000, a 3x3 rack system with 1-inch holes that can be configured and built a ton of different ways. Think of it kind of like a beefed up bells of steel cable tower, which is popular because of its price and versatility, with people even going so far as to make custom attachments for it. But with a 3x3 rack system, there's already hundreds of attachments out there. So we can strap things onto this from dozens of manufacturers. And depending how creative you are, you can get pretty crazy with it. I'm not sure anyone's gonna question the versatility of this thing. It's essentially 3 machines in one: a lat pull down, a low row, which can be done on the floor or off a bench, and a functional trainer. With any of those, you can utilize one or both of the pull points. That's a lot of functionality in a small space. Or you can bolt 2 of these together to make a rack, throw storage on them. RXd has always built pretty strong ecosystems around their rack, and this one's no different. They've got a lot more planned for the RX3 series, and we'll get into that. But as we saw with their Builder series of racks, their design choices aren't always as refined as they seem to be. And this one's got some quirks too. You guys know me, I'm always critical and honest and hopes I'm helping you make an informed decision. Maybe I'll even save you some money, because not everyone is fortunate enough to have companies send things for free for reviews like this was sent to us. So if you enjoy our content and want to support the channel, then please use our links if you make a purchase, because it's your support that keeps this channel going. So thank you. The question with the RX3 3000 series of cable towers and racks isn't just how well do they perform, but also are they worth the money? Because if you're looking into a versatile cable tower like this one, Bell's options, or even the Adonis, the RX3 3000 tower is priced right in the middle. Okay, it's actually priced much closer to Bell's, but since everyone is making an all-in-one style rack and cable system now, and with so many options out there, your choices aren't getting any easier. Even RXd has the RX3 Tornado Smith rack coming, which shares a lot of the same components and specs as this. We'll be reviewing that one too, so subscribe so you don't miss it. But they're using the same uprights, both have dual 200-pound weight stacks, same included attachments. Even the trolley mount is identical, and I do want to talk about that in a bit, but the only major difference between the two are the depth, because of the Smith machine, and the price, because of the additional components like the Smith machine and the tornado arms. Which makes sense. After all, the entire series of RX3 racks are built on the same platform of 11-gauge thick 3x3 steel tubing with 1-inch holes and 2-inch hole spacing. That's the industry standard of heavy-duty high-end racks. So this, like Rogue's Monster and Rep's PR5000 and other 3x3 rack systems, it's going to be beefy and stable and not the type of equipment you'll ever outgrow. To put that in perspective, Bells of Steel's cable tower uses 14-gauge thick 2.3-inch tubing with 5/8-inch holes, which really only a handful of companies use, and they all have different hole and hardware sizes, so you're stuck in a very limited ecosystem, hence why people started making their own attachments for it. It's not really standardized and definitely not modular like 3x3 racks are. These specs are also a nice upgrade and a good example of RXd listening to feedback, because in our Builder series review, I called them out for their inconsistencies. Sometimes they were using 1-inch holes, sometimes a 1/2 inch, sometimes 2-inch hole spacing, and other times 1.5 inches. This time they got it right, for the most part. I do have some criticisms. Some are nitpicky, like the magnetic selector pin doesn't have a hole to store it when you're using the top plate. It's fine, you can just leave it up there, but some of the complaints are more substantial. So let's get into how this works, because it'll better set up our comparisons in price and functionality. The RX3000 uses a dual pulley configuration. What that means is if you pull on one cable, you've got a 2-to-1 pulley ratio. Or you can link them or pull on both of them at the same time, and you've got a 1-to-1 pulley ratio. Using one pull point at a time with the RX3 3000 gives you a 2-to-1 ratio and twice the cable travel to work with. And with about 100 inches of cable, there's not going to be any limitations on what you can do with this. The 200-pound stack then becomes effectively 100 pounds because with a 2-to-1 ratio, you get twice the cable, but half the weight. So your stack starts at 10 pounds and then you've got 5-pound weight increments, which is great for functional trainer type movements where you want a lower starting weight and smaller increments. It's also the same increments you'll find on Rogue's FM series, Reps Aries, and most other home gym options. When you connect the two, or just use both at once, you get a 1-to-1 pulley ratio and access to the full weight of the stacks. But the trade-off is you have half the cable to work with. During a low row or lat pull down, that's not a problem. You don't need a ton of travel. And a 200-pound stack is plenty for most people on those heavy exercises. As the stickers on the stack show, when linked, you'd have a 10-pound starting weight and 10-pound increments. Except I just said the single cable with the 2-to-1 ratio starts at 10 pounds. Wouldn't it change the weight when we change the pulley ratio by linking them? Wouldn't it get RX'd? Of course it would. And we'd weigh these things before sending them to that jerk who reviews things, right? And before posting them on our website, right? Because that would be awkward, you know, if all of the weight stickers were wrong like these are. The issue is they forgot to account for the weight of the selector rod, band pegs, and other components that are attached to the lead plate. So the lead plate really weighs 20 pounds, not 10. Now, before you're too hard on Get RX'd, like I just was, this is not the first time I've seen this, or second, or third. Fringe's Dane, for example, did something similar, except their starting weights and weight jumps rendered it useless for my wife. The RXd 3000 does have logical starting weights and weight jumps. 10 pounds for one cable with 5-pound weight jumps, and 20 pounds when linked with 10-pound increments. And this is a super easy fix. Just swap out the stickers with the right weights, preferably stickers that show both weights so you can easily identify the single and dual weights. All right, stickers aren't that big of a deal. What matters is how well this works as a cable tower and as a full-fledged rack. The low row on this is probably its best feature because with a 1-to-1 ratio, you've got a 200-pound stack to work with, and of course could add more weight with a gym pin or by using the built-in band pegs. Also, because the trolley height is adjustable, you can sit on a bench rather than being forced to sit on the floor like with many of these systems. That also means you can technically row from wherever and however you want, and regardless of how or where you row, the pull is smooth. Get RX'd does sell a foot plate attachment, which we have, and it's solid, but if you have a bench, I'd skip it because it's not included with the tower. Actually, only the handles come included. Even this connector is additional, but you can just use an extra carabiner to link the sides, which is what we do. I mention that because you see me in all these clips using a ton of different attachments and trying out different things while we test the equipment. So if something catches your eye, just ask about it in the comments and realize that none of it is gonna come with this. If for some reason your bench won't work as a brace for rows, you can use the upright, or you could even straddle the thing as long as you're not posting those clips online. I did try lots of other exercises off the low row. I even attempted to put Reps Pegasus seat on it, which it obviously fits on. They're both imported, so they're both built to metric specs. I was kind of hoping I could do cable chest supported rows with it, but the pull point isn't low enough to get a good range of motion. Oh, sorry, this is a Get RX'd review. I tried to put on the Get RX'd Pegasus seat. Luckily, the pull point does go low enough for curls and for all kinds of other exercises that aren't as important as curls. What about high pulls though? After all, Get RX'd is trying to maximize versatility in a small footprint. That typically means you have to sacrifice something. The RX 3000 is tall at 93 inches, and with no current options for a shorter version, it might not fit in everyone's space, but I'm not sure how well a shorter option would work anyway. That's because with the design of the trolleys, you're not pulling from the top of the tower, which can affect your range of motion. Also, since the trolleys don't stick out from the upright much, your pull angle won't be perfectly vertical. But that's getting pretty nitpicky because it's close and we're asking this thing to do a lot in a pretty small footprint. At 6 foot tall and with Get RX'd lat seat as low as possible, I've got a little bit of room to spare on lat pull downs and other pulls where the towers are linked. But with single arm movements, I can't get a good stretch unless I sit on the floor. Winnie, by the way, at 5'6", basically maxes out the range of motion with single handle movements as well when using the seat. Also, the tolerances are loose on the lat seat, so it lifts up and moves quite a bit during heavy pulls, so it's another accessory I'd probably skip. Overall though, high pulls are pretty good considering everything we're asking the RX 3000 to do. I'd echo that same sentiment for it as a functional trainer, except for the one thing I really don't like about the 3000 is adjusting the trolley's height. Going down is easy, but getting it up can be tricky. I don't want to say it's too tight, since normally you could just add some lube to help make it move smoother, but I tried that and the only way to really get it going is to use two hands. The trolley is just kind of bulky and heavy, and while I'm as American as the next guy and love that 11 gauge steel, not everything has to be as overbuilt as possible. I get it, you're moving a lot more weight than with something like Reps Aries or Athena trolleys, so it needs to be bulked up, but then you need rollers or other tweaks to keep the movement smooth like Rogue's FM series. It's fine, it works, but I do worry how well that same basic design will work with those tornado arms. I guess we'll find out in our review. If you can get past that though, it's solid. Again, pulls are smooth because the aluminum pulleys have good bearings in them and the pulley system is well engineered. Anytime you're using one handle at a time, I'd say the RX3 3000 is very good. When you use two handles at the same time off a single tower, like we've got here, like for flies for example, it's not optimal. That's because of a few things. Number one, the handles are controlling a single stack, so your arms are linked. It's not a true unilateral experience. That's not the end of the world though. It still works well enough. It's just a bit of a trade-off given its compact and versatile nature, and you could just train one arm at a time if you decide you don't like how it feels. Number two, because the pull points are so close together, the resistance curve won't be perfectly smooth as your arms and body can get in the way, especially if you have like super huge arms and shoulders that are the envy of every man. Then the cables may rub on them sometimes. Again, not a deal breaker, just something to note. Now those issues are only issues with it as a solo cable tower. As a full power rack, you've got two independent weight stacks. The question then becomes, is it worth the money? The problem is, this is hard to make a direct comparison to. Sure, dual pulley systems aren't exactly new. There's Rogue's CT1X2, which is not remotely in this price range. And while Bell's cable tower is, I think until we see Bell's Kraken, which we'll be reviewing, we won't have something to directly compare this to. But I'll do my best. The RX3 3000 cable tower is priced pretty close to Bell's selectorized cable tower, and although I don't love moving the trolleys on the 3000, it's essentially a beefed up version of that same concept of single and dual pull points that can be linked. And with this, since it's basically just a 3x3 rack with 1-inch holes, I'm not locked into someone else's ecosystem. I've got nearly unlimited options of what I can put on it. So I'd take the 3000 unless I needed the lower ceiling height Bell's provides, or if I wanted a much cheaper plate-loaded option, which is actually the version of Bell's tower we recommended in our review. The Adonis costs twice as much as this, so I'm not sure that comparison makes much sense. it's also a much more refined offering. As a rack, that's tricky. Comparing it to something like Rep's Athena makes some sense because their prices are similar, but the Athena is a more polished option. Its pull is super smooth and it has a much higher build quality. Also, if you can afford to add the lat low to the Athena, the RX 3000 rack pretty much loses every advantage it had except for price. You could argue the ability to make the 3000 a 1-to-1 ratio by linking the cables gives you a heavy enough stack to compare it with Rep's Aries or Rogue's FMs, but that is not a battle this would win. It's not remotely on that level, which leaves us with the Athena since they have similar build options with both having wall-mounted and freestanding versions, and you can even add storage shelves to them. The issue is the Athena's 2-to-1 pulley ratio means even with the upgraded weight stacks, you've only got 110 pounds of effective weight per stack, and while you can link the two sides of an Athena or use gym pins to increase the weight, I can do that here as well, and the RX3 is still going to be the more versatile option. If you're looking at a plate-loaded Athena though, the RX3 can't compete with that price. So it's kind of like, do you sacrifice some build quality and live with the RX3 3000's quirks because of its versatility, or do you pay for the more polished and refined option? Let me know what you think. What would you go with? Thank you so much to our Patreons for helping us keep this dream alive, and thanks for watching.